Welcome to Lexington Public Library's Tales from the Kentucky Room podcast, where we explore Lexington's history and people. I'm your host, David Bryant, and in each episode, we will feature a guest who will share a piece of local history. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Tales from the Kentucky Room podcast. My name is David Bryant, and today I'm talking with Wayne Johnson. Of course, as you know, in 2025, the city of Lexington is celebrating its 250th birthday. So today's topic is perfect for February, and I think it puts some of our recent weather events into perspective a little bit. Today, Wayne is going to tell us about a legendary winter storm from the week of January 17th, 1994, that really kind of took over the area, the whole state, and just really overwhelmed everyone. Welcome to the podcast, Wayne.
Thank you, David.
So I think to get started, can you just provide overall picture of how the storm took effect?
Well, it started on Sunday evening, January 16th, 1994, and it started as a icy sleet type of weather. Nobody saw what was coming. As far as I remember, and as looking through the newspaper articles, they knew a storm was coming, but they didn't know the impact this particular storm would have. So it started sleeting ice later on Sunday evening on that January 16th, and then it changed over to snow. And by the end of the storm, I guess maybe Monday morning, as far as the snow event, we had 10.2 inches of snow here in Lexington. Louisville had, I think, 15 plus inches of snow. And I mean, this was a statewide event, this snow event. Robertson County, up in north central Kentucky, up north somewhere, they had the most snow at 25 inches. So when we woke up Monday morning, most Kentuckians were covered in snow. I think it's important to, as a segue into the later week's events, that it started out as an ice event, and then the snow covered the ice, which made the roads much more hazardous and much more difficult to clear during the week when the really cold weather hit. You know, Lexington and I guess most communities, they can handle snow. But as this last event here in Lexington proved, you know, it's tougher when the ice falls first and then the snow covers the roads. It's more difficult to clear the roads.
Yeah. So getting ready for this podcast, I looked at some old newspaper coverage from the Herald-Leader from that week, and it was very much a kind of change from on Sunday to, well, this could be bad. Everybody's going to the grocery store, you know, the classic kind of things. And then just kind of like each day, it really got more and more devastating to the point that all of the interstates were closed. People were stranded. They were in emergency situations, that sort of thing. Do you remember who the governor was at the time?
Yes. Governor Brereton Jones.
Okay, and go ahead.
He actually, I think you may have already alluded to the report. You read the newspaper articles. He put out a report after the storm to kind of gauge how the state handled the storm, what we did good, what we didn't do very good. And I think most people thought we could have been better prepared. But sometimes you have to experience something to be prepared for it. And nobody was really, you know, Kentucky doesn't have these kind of storms. They come once every, 2 or 3 decades. So we learned a lot, and the governor did have a study done, and we actually have a copy here in the Kentucky Room that I think both of us read before we start this podcast. Two things that I remember the most about that storm is the month before, right before Christmas, got pneumonia. So I was basically in bed for a week and then in my apartment for a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I didn't return. I was out of work for like 3.5 weeks, I guess it was. And I didn't actually return to work, didn't get the doctor's approval until the Friday before that Sunday the storm hit. And I still remember to this day getting in my car and just thinking I'm a free man here going to work on Friday. I'm like, this is what freedom feels like, because I'd been kind of, in prison basically with this pneumonia. So I felt a really sense of relief when I started back to work on that Friday, and here it is, 2 days later. I get stranded in my apartment for another week, and I'm like, am I ever going to escape this?
Well, that was actually going to be my question. I was going to ask you what you remember personally about the storm, and you went into that. And so,
yes, I had cabin fever even before the storm hit, and was freed from that cabin fever just a couple days before, and then I had to go back. Another thing I remember about that storm, and this is these stories are true. I'm not making them up. This is a true story. I guess sometime later on Sunday evening, the 16th, I guess when the snow started falling, that I'm like, well, we're not gonna be working tomorrow. And in fact, I think the library was out the whole week, if I remember correctly. And so I stayed up a little later, and finally went to bed maybe around 1:30 or so. Not for sure, but I do remember watching the snow. There's something about snowstorms. It's kind of, especially at nighttime, it's kind of fun to look out the window and just see and this was a heavy snow. So anyway, I'm in my bed, and I'm just like right ready to fall asleep. And I lived in a 3-story apartment building, and maybe around 1:30, 2:00, I heard this big thump on the floor above me. And then another big thump. Is almost like somebody was, jumping up and down on the floor or whatever. And it just hit me. And I never thought of this before, but it just hit me that what would happen if the floor above me collapsed on me? And I'm like, I'm a goner, because that's how big that's how loud these thumps were. It's like,
yeah,
it got me to think of what would happen if this floor fell on me in my bed, especially. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm not going to survive that. So anyway, I eventually get to sleep, and I wake up the next morning. Of course, first thing you do is you look outside and you see, 10 inches of snow, or it was still snowing if I remember correctly. But it was a winter wonderland. And I turned on the TV, and I'm sure as you read the newspaper articles, you saw this. But at about 3:30 that morning, it was all over the news that morning. The earthquake hit Southern California.
Yes, I was going to bring that up.
One of the first pictures or first stories they showed a picture of the Northridge, California, an apartment complex, 3-story, that had pancaked and killed like 17 people on the bottom floor. And my first thought was, gosh, I just thought about that early this morning, about having an apartment floor fall on me. And then one of the first stories you see is about the earthquake. A lot of people that, if you read the newspaper articles, we weren't the worst disaster that week. It was the Southern California earthquake. I think 57 people died. So the newspapers, at least our local newspapers, would have split the reporting between the earthquake in Southern California and our winter storm. But that's a true story. I never thought a floor above me falling on me until that morning, and then I wake up and I find out that it actually happened in Southern California. It was kind of eerie.
Yeah, that week was not a great week for weather.
No.
The front page from the Herald Leader on the day of that earthquake, it's like half of it is the earthquake in the San Fernando Valley, half of it is the local weather. And like you said, Kentucky, we're not used to that kind of winter weather. I was living in Ohio at the time, and I remember in 1994 a really serious storm. Every colleges were closed. I mean, here, University of Kentucky was closed, which was even rarer in that time period. I think now the university closes more. Do you remember how long it took before things really started to reopen?
Yeah. The main closures, the big news of closings was the interstates. Governor Jones on Monday declared all the Kentucky interstates closed to traffic, and most in the Bluegrass Parkway. You couldn't get on them. Now we didn't. The state didn't have the manpower to enforce that, but he closed the interstates, and they were closed Monday and Tuesday completely, and then I think they started trickling back open on Wednesday. I-64 was closed from Lexington to Louisville, I think until like either Thursday or Friday of that week, just
Yeah.
because they couldn't clear the interstates.
I think I read that people were fined if they were
Yes,
on the
yeah,
interstates. Yeah.
yes, and looking back on it 30 years later, of course, I wasn't going to leave my apartment. I didn't have anywhere to go. So, but there were, people, the truckers and the businesses that had their supply route interrupted by these closings. It was pretty frustrating for them. But, I think Governor Jones, given how the temperatures dropped the next couple of days, I mean, we broke records. I mean, we had 20, well, it wasn't a record for Lexington, but we had 20 below, I think, on Wednesday morning. I think our record is 21 below in
These are
January.
actual temperatures too.
Temperatures,
not
yeah,
wind chills.
not wind chill
Yeah.
factors.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like 20 below. It is 20 below.
Right.
So the temperatures really got to dangerous levels after the snowfall. And I think the closing of the interstates probably saved some lives, because if you got stranded out there and it's 20 below zero weather, I think the lowest in Kentucky was in Carter County in Grayson, and I think it got to 31 below.
Wow.
Yeah, so the temperatures were really uh, low, and the fact that people weren't supposed to be out traveling probably saved lives. And also, I don't think there was one single fatality on the roads that week because of all
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
That's truly amazing.
And when when the interstates did open back up later on in the week, uh, people went very slow. Normally a 65 mile per hour highway turned into like 40 miles or lower. So most people took it a lot slower once the interstates were open. But basically, Kentucky, for those first, 2 or 3 days, I guess the best way to put it is Kentucky came to a standstill.
Yeah, definitely. And so I also, you mentioned Governor Brereton's report. So do you think that changed the way Kentucky and localities approached winter weather moving forward?
It probably did. One point that one of the street commissioners pointed out is you can't, they only have so much money, so you can't go out and buy equipment for a once in a, generation type of storm, because it's just not cost effective. I alluded to the storm few weeks ago where the neighborhoods were complaining that their streets hadn't been cleared. You just can't prepare for those type of storms, or you can't spend money to prepare for those kind of storms when they only happen very rarely.
Yeah, it's one thing with a couple of inches and you just decide to get cozy and stay home. But when it's 2 feet and 20 below and you're really worried that you're going to still have electricity, and it's a totally different kind of situation.
Yeah, I didn't plan, like probably a lot of people. I don't remember being told, hey, the storm of the century's coming on Sunday. I don't remember that. I was, for whatever reason, I was well stocked with food and so I didn't have to go out to the store. But for people who weren't prepared,
Yeah, there was just the way I understood it, they weren't expecting this. There was this huge blast of air coming through like Siberia that normally would come down through Canada and kind of dissipate, but just nothing stood in its way. And it just swooped down much lower than normal. So it was a truly rare event.
And it wasn't just Kentucky, too. It's
Yes.
the Midwest and
Yeah,
the
we could have had it
Northeast.
worse. We could have been in Minnesota.
Yeah. But the thing of it is, those states are better prepared.
They're more
for that kind of event
definitely
than we were.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been a nice little trip back in time. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover that I didn't ask you about?
Yeah, we could maybe talk about how Kentucky reacted to the needy.
Oh.
Meaning the people that needed their medicine didn't have food. So the National Guard was called out and did a great job transporting essential workers to their workplace, like doctors and nurses or nurses to nursing homes. So they did a very good job with getting people to where they need to go, the essential people. Same with medicine supplies if people needed medicine. The National Guard did a great job. The state police did a great job. They went out and got stranded motorists off the roads, probably saved a lot of lives because, like I said, when those temperatures got to, 20 below here in Lexington, I think it was maybe 25 in Louisville and throughout the state, if somebody's stranded on the interstate in those kind of temperatures.
Yeah, it's a few minutes and you're in serious trouble.
So the National Guard came out and did what they had to do. As far as clearing the roads, because of the ice and sleet that fell before the actual snow event, the roads were much more difficult to clear. And I guess that's why it took so long to get the interstates back up and running. Here in Lexington, our streets and roads got some complaints because apparently, according to newspaper articles, some of the surrounding counties that were hit just as bad as we were cleared their roads quicker than us.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that we didn't have available those, they call them tractor graders that can just like construction crews work with, that can just kind of eat through the ice. It wasn't until like Thursday maybe that Fayette County got a hold of those, but they got some criticisms.
Yeah, and they have so many more roads too.
Exactly, so much more mileage.
So, yeah.
And of course, the Streets and Roads spokesman pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
That say Clark County might have a certain amount, but we have much more. And again, you bring up, or I brought up this point about you can't have expensive equipment sitting in a warehouse just waiting for a once in a generation type of storm. It's just not cost effective. But I think the city did learn a lot from the storm as far as snow removal from the roads. And I think the mayor, it's Mayor Miller at the time, made a point to.
Yeah, and she was out of town, I think I read, and she had to get back quickly. It was really hard, but it was impossible almost to get here.
Yeah, I think she was up on a vacation, and that's probably one of the worst nightmares for any mayor. It's just like the recent L.A. fires.
Right.
And the mayor was over and out of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, mayors want to get back and do their job. And Mayor Miller made a great effort to get back. And, of course, she met I think she started heading back maybe Sunday evening or Monday morning, and she ran into the same traffic problems with the roads that everybody else did. So, but I think she eventually got back here and jumped into action. And of course, even if you're not in the city at the time, you have the phones.
Right.
And
now you can hop on a Zoom call and talk to people and get your team together. It was a very different time then.
Mayor Miller was mayor here for like 12 years, and I got to hand it to her. She was always, whenever there was a problem, she jumped into action pretty quick.
Absolutely.
So, the preparation, like we mentioned about the report, there was more research on how we can be better prepared for something like this. And it's kind of a balancing act because we don't have the money to buy 10 tractor graders and put them in a warehouse and just wait for the once in generation storm to clear out the roads. That's not, like I said, not cost effective. So,
but I'd like to have them there when I want them.
well, I think one of the things Mayor Miller did after the storm is I think she put in her budget or something that apparently we weren't the first priority, that these tractor graders were like under contract, but we weren't the first priority. And I think she made a point next time that we're going to be priority number one. But there, when you have that ice on the road, I mean, salt can only do so much, especially once it gets down to certain temperature, and you need those tractor graders to just eat into the ice. I think we learned a lot from that. But yeah, it was I would consider it, we've had some bad storms, during my lifetime. That's to me, I don't remember the interstates ever being closed down for 2.5, 3, 4 days like that. And then a police official mentioned that crime was down.
Oh, yes. I saw that.
Yeah. And I think he said something like, these criminals don't have a work ethic when it gets to 20 below.
It was everyone just stayed home and didn't commit crimes.
Yeah. And,
it's pretty funny.
Yeah. And we talked about Fayette County schools were out the whole week. But, you mentioned UK, and UK never closed down back in those days. I think I remember one time in the winter of 77, first day of class, we were closed down. But other than that, now Monday the 17th, I think, was Martin Luther King Day, the holiday. And I think the UK was already closed. I'm not for certain if they were already closed on that Monday, but that may have been a school holiday, but they were definitely closed on Tuesday the 18th. And then the president, I think it was Wethington maybe, I believe that's who was president at the time, decided they were going to open the school back up on Wednesday, and there was an outcry from the students. But I think his reasoning was a lot of students lived on campus and could walk to class, didn't have to drive. But there was a outrage, I guess you could say, from some students and maybe professors too, about the UK opening up that soon. But yeah, that's, the Herald Leader, I think, said it best. That whole week, their headline would be on the top of the front page, Kentucky on ice. And that was basically the best definition of that week, is Kentucky on ice and snow.
Wayne, this has been fun talking and learning about these events. So thanks very much.
Well, you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to Tales from the Kentucky Room, a podcast brought to you by the Central Library's Kentucky Room staff at the Lexington Public Library. If you enjoyed listening, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. And please remember to recommend the podcast to friends. If you have any questions about local history or genealogy research, you can visit us in the Kentucky Room to use our collection and newspaper microfilm. Or you can email us at elibrarian@lexpublib.org. That's elibrarian@lexpublib.org. I'm David Bryant, and we'll be back with another episode next month.